Oh, Edwin's on Zoom. Oh, there's an echo.
You just have to use.
And I can see both.
Well, there's one.
No, it doesn't. I will. You're out of it.
Anybody else gotta get dentist office in here?
Dentist?
Well, you know,
Maybe not.
each know. Start with that. I just sent you some pictures. Okay.
And Hugh called you, right? Somebody. Yeah, go share.
Joe, are we, anybody talk to Joe?
I talked to him the other day. He didn't indicate anything about not being here.
Okay, we're recording, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so we'll get started. I'm just trying to get my iPad set up here. Yeah, okay. So we will call the July 3rd work session of the Northport Village Council to order at 2:02 PM. And the roll call will show that trustees Harper, Cavendish, Ager, and President McCann are present. Village clerk and village manager as well. And it looks like we've got Councilman Edwin Dean via Zoom. Do we have any additions to the agenda?
I have something quick that I was hoping we could add. I have a question and thought on our street banners, like our streetlight banners.
Aye. All right, we'll add item I, street banners.
Okay.
There's no other additions. All in favor of the agenda as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the agenda is set. And this will bring us to our first public comment. If anyone in person or via Zoom would like to make a public comment, you have 5 minutes to address the council. And you can raise your hand or unmute in Zoom and I'll recognize you. Okay. And if there are no takers, then we will.
One thing, I did get correspondence that I think he put in it's just, there isn't correspondence listed as on the agenda, so I just want to be sure. It's about it's from Meg Jean, which is the director of LIFT for Northport. It's about the water fountain station.
Okay. Just so that. Okay. All right, so we'll move on to our discussion items. The first item A is the 7th Street property, so Land Bank Authority transfer. And this is a discussion item today because last week, the manager and I, along with the township supervisor, met with Ty Wessel, our county commissioner, the county administrator, Jim Dyer, and the treasurer / Land Bank Authority chairperson, John Gallagher. And the meeting was to find out ways that the county could assist the council or the village in how we could move forward with some of our housing initiatives. And one of the keys I think that we took away from that meeting is the County Land Bank Authority and how they could help with blighted properties. And the discussion was revolving around 7th Street and ways that we could with the county, by conveying it to them, they could access brownfield funds to do pre-development work to make the property shovel ready. And wanted to bring that to the county or to the council. And we did ask somebody from the county, so Jim Dyer has joined us here to help with the discussion. and wanted to get council feedback. You know, at the meeting maybe a month or so ago, when we talked about the West Street, you
Mhm.
did, talk about 7th Street as an option. I think that that's something that the manager and I did take and go with, and so wanted to come back to the council with thoughts on if that's something we would want to pursue. And Jared did provide us with, we do have a survey here of approximately 1 acre of the south end of that 7th Street property, which would leave most of the wooded area to the north out of this conversation. And
So are we talking in terms of blighted properties, are we talking only about the part right on 7th Street that's had the,
Parcel
Yeah.
1 is the only one that has contamination, only because of our line.
Okay,
was
so
drawn.
that's a little space while we're talking about, and
yes,
how much space is that? Is that an acre, did you say?
I think approximately an acre, because the old parcel from Mod Court.
1.27,
There you go.
yeah, it's on the.
Okay,
And as was explained in the meeting, would be the process would be that we would, first have to approve a land split of this property. We would then convey, and it was in the documentation provided with the Land Bank Authority, that we would convey the property to the Land Bank Authority. They would then, Fishbeck is who they go through, I believe, correct, for the brownfield funding. And then after that work would be done, the property could then be conveyed back to the village for us to then do with what we would like. And with like again, shovel ready. So all the soil remediation and everything, removal of the concrete pad could be included in that. Basically, a development plan, is that what it was called?
Yeah, I can expand on that when you.
Any council want to speak, or do we want to hear from Jim, or?
let's hear from
I think
Jim
it's
first.
going.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, first of all, as county administrator, I appreciate being welcome to come to your council meeting to talk about these issues. It's definitely been an issue that we've been discussing at the county for, from what I understand, in excess of 20 years. How to deal with housing, and in particular, affordable and attainable housing. Essentially what we would call, as a general category, workforce housing. First of all, let you know that at our meeting coming up on Tuesday, I'll be making recommendations to the Board of Commissioners regarding how the county might overall respond to this, what some people have characterized, including myself, as a housing crisis. The essence of the recommendation is to put the responsibility for responding to that crisis in the office of the county administrator, and to use a newly formed housing collaborative that's sponsored by the Leelanau Peninsula Economic Foundation. They have a group called the Housing Collaborative that a number of community leaders are participating, including myself and Board Vice Chair Ty Wessel. So that's going to be a recommendation made to the board this coming Tuesday. But the main reason that you wanted me here, or John Gallagher as the county treasurer, who's the chair of the Land Bank Authority, is to discuss those things that the Land Bank and Brownfield Development Authorities can do for you for housing. First of all, it's important to recognize that these processes that I'm talking about can apply virtually to any property. It doesn't have to have proof of contamination. It just has to be underutilized. Now the 7th Street property would automatically qualify for that because it does have contamination on it. It's already documented with a phase 1 and a phase 2 review that are now out of date, unfortunately, because of when they were done. But it wouldn't necessarily have to apply just to that parcel. It could apply pretty much virtually to any property that you might want to develop for housing. And there are several different mechanisms that you can use for this. All of them generally would use a development agreement, where there would be an agreement between the village and the land bank authority. And potentially also a third party. For example, if you were to identify a developer that was willing to develop the property and you had vetted them in terms of, you know, your objectives and that sort of thing, that developer could also be a participant in the agreement to say, commit them to a specific type of project that you've already determined you want to do. And the scope of that could be included in the development agreement. And the process would essentially, in that three-way agreement, would be the village would deed the property to the land bank authority or the brownfield development authority, one or the other, or both, depending on the circumstances. Deed that to the land bank authority. All of the necessary environmental work and potentially some of the pre-development work that you would need to do, engineering, surveying, that sort of thing, could be done by done while it was owned by the land bank authority. And then once it was ready to be developed, could be conveyed back to the village or conveyed to the developer if that was your choice. It can be a fairly flexible process. So that's the basic process of what happens. The land bank authority would primarily, the things that the land bank authority can do is quiet title if there's an issue relating to, for example, some of that property may have been acquired through a tax foreclosure, and there might be an issue regarding the ability to convey that property to an owner. You can get quiet title through the land bank authority. You can also limit the environmental liability, but when it relates to non-tax foreclosed property, that protection is a little bit limited, but it's still there. So you can do that. The other thing, through the Brownfield Development Authority, you can set up a brownfield tax increment financing arrangement that will allow you to do some of the remediation through the tax increment financing, which is a process where typically the developer will pay that upfront. And whatever the cost may be upfront, they'll pay that, and then they recoup that back over the period of time through the taxes that are generated by the increment. Like, for example, if the property now has a zero taxable value because it's owned by a municipality, after the development occurs, it might have let's just say hypothetically, a $2 million value. The tax that's generated by that $2 million value would then be for the years of the capture, that can be up to, I believe, 20 years. That would be paid rather than to the village, it would be paid to the developer so they could recoup those funds. That's a particularly good mechanism to use for affordable housing because a lot of market rate developers, they want their money now. They're not looking for it to be recouped over a period of 20 years. But affordable housing developers take a longer view, and they're able to do that. In fact, desirous of doing that to get their some of their engineering and infrastructure costs repaid to them. Again, you can also do the environmental due diligence that are necessary. And I think, as Chris has already indicated, that can be paid through EPA grant funding that the county already has in place. In fact, we saw it recently. We submitted a request to extend our grant that we received from the EPA because we haven't been able to spend all of it quick enough. If you can believe that. So there is, we hope, if that grant is extended, there will be money readily available to do that sort of environmental due diligence. So that's I guess the long and short answer about what the county is permitted to do. And again, the agenda focuses on the 7th Street property, but this could be applied to any property that you own. that you want to develop as affordable housing.
Open for, yeah, Susan?
Boy, it seems like, why isn't every town in the county applying for?
Well, it's a good question.
It sounds like
I think
at the
part of
moment.
it is because there's, to put it mildly, Northport is miles ahead of most every other municipality in the county in terms of its desire to have this type of housing. And its willingness on its elected councils and its appointed planning commission to encourage that. I just had just came from the Rotary meeting, and we had, their presentation was a presentation by the Suttons Bay Township Supervisor. And he even mentioned that they were starting to pursue that now. And he said, he was learning about pilots and TIFs and had no idea how he could explain that to us, but just to assure us that was something that they were working on and pursuing. So, like I said, you guys are miles ahead of anybody else in the township, or excuse me, in the county, other than maybe Empire's been looking at it quite heavily, as well as Glen Arbor Township. Some of the other townships just haven't even, they don't know what to do about it. I think it's Centerville Township that Cedar's located.
Mhm.
They've been wrestling with this. There's a developer that wants to do some development like that in the township, and there's some resistance to it. So most of the interest that's come from this has come frankly from Homestretch and Peninsula Housing. In fact, we just completed an arrangement with the Suttons Bay Schools, the Land Bank Authority, and Peninsula Housing to purchase. It helped the Suttons Bay Schools out of a very touchy budget issue, and we've acquired, Peninsula Housing has acquired some of the westernmost athletic fields, which they'll move to another location in the future. And they considered it surplus property. They'll continue to use those fields for 3 years, but we have 3 years essentially to complete due diligence to develop that as a affordable housing complex. In that time, we need to get zoning approvals, arrange for water and potentially sewer, because it is in the village, sewer and water, municipal water are both potentially available. Property that we own just on the other side of the street, Herman Road, that's owned by Peninsula Housing, is in the township, and they don't have readily available water and sewer. They'd have to develop it with septic and wells, and that creates a whole different problems for development of higher density housing that you need higher density to be able to do workforce attainable, affordable type housing. So that's I guess the short answer as to why others aren't doing this yet. You guys are way ahead of the
I
curve.
have another more specific question. So, a developer might or might not be involved in this, agreement.
It wouldn't be necessary, but it would be possible. And sometimes that can be really good if you have a specific
Do
developer.
we know anybody who might be interested?
Yeah,
John Stimson from
Yeah.
Homestretch expressed some interest in the
Right,
7th Street
okay.
property.
Okay,
Peninsula would be interested. I
Okay.
can tell you both would be. I think Habitat's kind of got their hands full right now with their development near M72. But yeah,
Laura?
Yeah, so I have a few questions. So when it's conveyed to the land bank and then conveyed back or whatever, is there money that has to change hands to do that? So it's just done for no cost and then back for no cost?
a dollar maybe.
yeah, something.
Yeah, does it then, when it's conveyed back, the whole purpose or the way to be approved to do this is that it does have to be developed for housing?
Not necessarily, but that would generally be you wouldn't want to do this unless you had that in mind. If you had other purposes in mind, you would probably do other things. Because this is specifically, the things that we are able to do are really amenable towards housing.
Cause you need to have the tax
Right,
revenue eventually.
eventually, yes, to make any of that work. I mean, in theory, could it be used to develop a park? Yeah, but it would be less, again, you wouldn't be able to use any tax increment financing mechanisms, but it is ideal for the development of housing. And again, it's a good way, that's why I mentioned the potential for the three-way agreement, because you can get a developer involved. And not, because you avoid the problem of taking that property and immediately conveying it to a developer, and then you have necessarily no control. They may say they will do all these things, but they would be contractually bound to do so, and they wouldn't receive conveyance of the property until that was accomplished. So there's a lot of ways to put both incentives and clawbacks into that kind of a contract, and it's an ideal situation, I think, for the kind of thing that we're doing through Peninsula Housing. And I keep saying we because I'm a board member of Peninsula, as I think you're aware, that we're doing in the Sutton Space with the Sutton Space School property, because it's going to take at least 3 years to develop that. And in theory, even though we're a nonprofit, we potentially be subject to taxation of that, because it's not, it's property that we're holding without using it for housing. So it insulates us from that. It insulates us from environmental liability until the due diligence is completed. And again, if it's not possible to develop that as affordable housing, it could be reconveyed back to us and then sold to a developer. But again, subject to the terms of that development agreement.
Okay, and another question I have that's not really for Jim, but I had mentioned to Jared that another thing that, to me, I just want to be sure people are aware of is that the DPW lift station split isn't recognized by the county equalization. So if this was something that's gonna go forward, I think we would have to figure that out so that it's correct.
And that's absolutely true.
And then, I mean, so it seems to me that part of it is deciding if that location is something, because obviously getting it cleaned up is very appealing. It's something that we would like to have done. I mean, we know that there's contamination and that would be good to not be there, especially since it can travel through water and most likely has. That's all the reports that were from 2022 and prior say that. But to me, it's kind of a discussion on if housing, attainable housing is something that we want to see if it can be pursued there or not, which we had charged Jim with looking into and having that discussion again, because I mean, this seems like a awesome opportunity if that's what everybody wants to pursue there still.
I agree, and that's why, after speaking with Jared, that's why it's here, so
Yeah.
I mean, as earlier, Will expressed in a couple of meetings ago, like that. It's a residential neighborhood, it should be looked at, and obviously the planning commission with its rubric is identifying the village properties and their potential. And I feel like the council already may know whether or not that has potential, and I personally feel like it does. And would like to see.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things to me still is always gonna come down to, like, is there a developer who's actually willing to develop it as attainable housing? Because it's absolutely in wetland. So,
No, well,
the state considers it that, yes.
you're talking about the wrong part of the property.
No, I'm not. Like, this is the wetland map right here. So, I mean, yeah, this is the wetland map. So it's just not the delineation. I'm just saying, like, I know that there's gonna be causes. I'm not saying that it's necessarily the wrong thing. I'm just saying, like, I know that that adds expense. Some of the delineation, some of the studies that we said that there would have to be dewatering to build there on that part of the parcel, yes. So I just, I like want the developer to really be sure that that makes financial sense, because I don't want to get into it and we're doing this conveyance and we're doing the transfer. And then the developer is concerned or runs into roadblocks that make it so that what they thought they could do, they can't do.
Yeah.
And that's why you can set those parameters in the development agreement. That would be one of the things that you would examine is dewatering gonna be required on the specific site that you're going?
Well, and with the layout and the plan and everything else, because I think it's
Exactly.
probably possible to find spots that wouldn't, it's just not spots they necessarily tested for that when they did their study.
Yeah, when,
I think it's, I mean, you got your delineated wetlands in here. That which we're not touching, none of those are in here. And I'm willing to bet that this has filter, at least 2 feet of filter already on it. It is way above the water table.
The water table is outlined in the studies. I mean, it's like 8 inches down and in a bunch of the studies within that part of the property.
I'd be willing to, for a test.
I think it definitely would be different now. When they did the studies, it was in high water level.
This is a private engineering firm, it's not Eagle, and I did.
This is the Eagle map. Yes, this is the Eagle map. So
I
what,
think this is more, what they're talking about, this is more of a general.
I'm not trying to say this is the wrong thing. I'm just trying to point out that there could be issues that arise. And I want to be sure that there's a way or a path, if we've started this, to remedy that. That's what I'm trying to say.
And that's again, what you, the parameters that you can establish in the development agreement, that would be your go versus no go, or build versus no build more appropriately, determinations in that agreement.
Because without a doubt, you could build there. You can build almost anywhere you want, always. It's just a matter of what does it cost to be able to do it there. And that's just my concern, is that I want to be sure that there's a path or a thought for if that is.
I thought Peninsula Housing had already expressed interest in doing something there.
when Jared and I met with, Larry and John. John Stimson from, Homestretch was actually gonna contact Mansfield and Associates to bring us back a plan for this 1 acre parcel.
Yeah.
And he said it would take about six weeks, I think, at that time, and it's been around there, so, but. He would come back with something, a layout for that parcel, based on the county survey. And then we could further those discussions. We should also point out in the document provided by the Land Bank Authority, the uses, agricultural, recreational centers, use for childcare,
Yeah.
elimination of blight. I mean, so it doesn't necessarily have to go to housing, but that's one of the options. And as you said, this is a perfect opportunity for us to, along with the county, get that work done of cleaning up that site so that it could be used for something in the future, if not housing, that those contaminants are removed.
Yeah.
Which is something I think we all want to see.
Right, I really am not trying
Oh,
to
that's
say that
okay.
I'm against it. I'm just trying to say that there are some things that I want to be sure that are.
And that could be
Thought.
stuff that, you know, in the tip, yeah, nobody's not disagreeing with you there. What I'm just saying is that those are things that Homestretch would look into, and could that be recouped through their TIF? And things like that. So yes, there is, I mean, we're not gonna say, yeah, let's do it. Next meeting, we approve it and boom, we've got the plan. There's gonna be more conversation about this.
What is the next step on this? What needs to be the next step? We wait for this plan that he's developing, or?
We wait for the plan, or because there are alternative options to the housing, we look at doing a land split, splitting the 1.2 acres off of the total.
Mhm.
Consider conveying it to the Land Bank Authority for this remediation process, with hopes of development. But as Jim said, in the development agreement, we have parameters. And so, you know, if we get to the point where it can't be done, at least the site has been cleaned.
So what's the next step? We need to vote on something we need to vote at our next meeting to separate the property, separate the parcels, or what do we do next?
Well, great question. I'm working on splitting out completing the split of the, lift station section of the parcel. If we wanna actually split it the way that's represented on the survey, that's a separate process. And then I would also say that, you know, if there's consensus here to move forward with action, then I can start working with the county on what exactly the agreement would look like for conveying the property, which would be an action step upcoming.
Okay.
So those would be the three, you know, one I'm doing administratively now to finish the lift station split. The second would be actually completing a split. And the third would be working with the county on the actual agreement. So those would be my mental action points. Only one or two of those would come back to the council.
I think there's consensus.
Yeah, just pursue and see what is possible and get everybody talking about it at the next meeting, right? I mean,
Right.
or whichever meeting the information is ready for.
Yeah,
But we gotta keep going, we gotta keep moving and not just think.
and that's one of the reasons Jared and I put it on the agenda is because we, as a council have talked about keeping the momentum going
Right.
and keeping things actionable.
Well, and
this
I think-
certainly does that.
Part of that too is, I mean, like with the planning commission, with the rubric, I think there are other properties that are gonna be possible to look at as well. But I think that with the housing crisis that we have, I mean, developing one property is not going to solve that. So I mean, I think pursuing as many paths as possible to make this happen, if more than one of them comes to fruition, then that's a good thing.
Mhm.
So I definitely think it makes sense to continue with any opportunities that come forward to see what ones can pan out and actually work.
And what does when does the planning commission think it might be done with that rubric?
We're doing 5 a meeting and he's been plowing through
Yeah,
getting,
we might be able to pretty much wrap it up at the next
Oh,
meeting
good.
next week, but then I think it's more of like a narrowing down. But we might be able to come out of the next meeting with like a handful, 5 to 7 properties that we can dig into much more detail. I also just want to mention too, when we talked about scheduling this item and I put it on the agenda. I knew that it was sort of a loose discussion. It wasn't, we didn't have a specific idea of action steps necessarily that would come out of this meeting. I understand this has been going on, you know, we've really just been working on this property for a long time. I didn't expect that we would come out of the meeting and necessarily have direct action steps. It was more about, I think, getting direction. Where would you like to go from here?
Yeah.
I can bring it back again for discussion and talk about what action steps are coming after I have some idea about where exactly we want to go with this. And after we've had some more information, more discussion with the county.
Well, and now that we brought this up, this whole discussion up, there may be responses and reaction from members of the community.
yeah, I mean, there's many public that don't want it developed at all, so.
Absolutely.
And we could certainly take the wooded area and create a recreational designation there that would, you know, turn it into a quiet park, something that, you know, would be.
Or just protect it in general, even if it's not turned into something, yeah.
Exactly, so protection over that property that would.
But you could do planning for that at the same time you're planning to do housing
Efficient.
development on the southernmost 1.27 acres. I would just encourage you, whatever you decide to do is or the county is offering you an opportunity to finally do something rather than talk about something. So take that for what it's worth and there will be other entities that this sort of thing will be offered to and the opportunity for the brownfield development of monies is not going to be infinite. It won't be, it won't last forever and it won't be infinite. So to put it bluntly, first come, first serve.
Okay, any other discussion from the council on this topic? It sounds like we want the manager to move forward with the steps that he has outlined in terms of the lift station split, possible property split, and then discussion with the county and come back to us with some information at our next meeting. Yeah, at least for discussion.
Yeah.
Consensus. Okay. All right, thanks everybody for that discussion. Item B is, Jim, thank you for joining
you for
us.
allowing
I'm
me
sure
to be
you got
here.
places to be.
Yeah.
That's it.
Other.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jesse.
Yeah, go sit in that seat, get comfortable. No, I'm just kidding.
Bye.
Okay, next up is the recreation plan. So we need a updated recreation plan. The one in the packet was from 2016-20. Did the council ever, or the planning commission ever approve the 2020-21?
Laura and I were talking about it and that probably not, I don't think.
I don't think so. I mean, not that I'm aware
Yeah,
of.
I think it was-
I think it's from 2015, and the draft even at the bottom says it's the 2015 draft, like every page at the
Yeah.
bottom says 2015 draft.
Because I know,
And then there's asterisks that are like, will be added in final version and stuff like that, so.
In either way, whether it was adopted in
I think
15
it
or
doesn't even
20,
matter.
in order to apply for future grants, the village will need to have approved recreation plan
Mhm.
filed with the DNR. And so I'd like to get started just with taking what we have and updating it. Bringing it back here so we can talk about it, really try and keep it narrow and simple, but still meet the guidelines that the state has.
One of the things that I just want to point out or ask is that I think that it's a great idea, and obviously I very support it. I've wanted the rec plan to be redone so that we can use it for grants for a while. But the master plan, some of the goals and the tweaking that is happening with that in that draft, when you look at it, is that we're including universal access as part of that. And so I think that could carry through and be sure that that language is updated in the rec plan too, to reflect that. So I just, when you're working on it, was thinking that,
Yeah.
just because there's a number of places where I think it could just be, I mean, it's like slight revisions that then change it.
yeah, it's, because I know Kathy Ferguson, I worked on an updated one. Because it's like, still doesn't have the driving range for the golf course, which we had talked about, and, obviously the org structure in here for the council with our committees would need to be changed and stuff like that, but.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that if you're willing and able to work on the updates for it, then that's fantastic. I mean, that's ideal, because then either the council or the planning commission, I don't know who would need to review it, but whichever, then can just look at your draft, and instead of talking about what we don't like, we look at the new version and go from there.
Yeah, and we have some time, so it's not something I need to do within the next month or two, but something that I want to bring up now. Start working on it. If there are any other ideas about who should be involved, how, what kind of process, all those kinds of things. Otherwise, I'm just gonna start working on it.
My question is less about who's helping you work on it, more who's supposed to review it after the fact. Is it,
Yeah.
can it come straight to council, or is it supposed to go to planning first, or?
It can just come through council.
Okay.
Okay,
And then you had a question on the summary thing saying, do we wanna do it jointly with the township or not? To me, I mean, with the fact that we want it for grants, I think that there's obviously opportunity always to collaborate with them, but we also could update it and then still collaborate on the next version. I also, in the document you put in there, it said that you can work with schools also. And I know the school doesn't have a rec plan, because I've talked to Superintendent Weatherby about the fact that do they have a rec plan or a mass capital improvement plan or any of those plans? They don't. But I think that there could be some opportunity there too, since they do have a number of properties also, and some of them are right within the village, so. But again, not to hold it up, like to maybe just do, that's my view, is to maybe just work on the vision and then see if we can collaborate in the future.
That's what I was gonna say. You can always do a village plan now and then later on do a cooperative plan.
Cause the school, I mean, he didn't seem opposed to having one, it's just that's not anything they ever felt the need to do, but I think that there could be some value, and the same with working with the township, so.
It makes a lot of sense when the ball fields, for example, are right at the village limits, Raymond Hill is right at the village limits, to look at those collectively. Not to mention the trail,
Yeah,
but I think the village can just do the 5-year plan for the village now. Make sure that once you have a
current,
plan, so
yeah.
you can apply for grants starting next year. And then look at cooperative plans later.
I like that.
Well, I don't envy you writing the section on the old mill pond and objectives for the old mill pond,
Yeah.
which, by the way, was never a mill pond. It was a logging holding pond. There was never a mill there, but it's called the old mill pond.
That could be tricky. But that's why I wanna,
You know,
I can draft it
mhm,
and then bring it back here and take a look at some of those objectives, those
Mhm,
goals, the
right,
specifics for something like that.
Well,
It could be a
and-
community discussion.
And redoing the rec plan requires a public hearing too, to adopt it. So I mean, anything that would be changed or would be discussed, the public has a say also
mhm.
in what they think of what the new version is.
So have the manager work on updating the rec plan. In the past, the chair of the recreation committee would help with that, but I think you're more than willing and able to do it. You just roll with it and bring it back for feedback.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion on the rec plan? Manager's got his objectives. Next up is the short-term rentals update and next steps. And, um, you know, it's, back in 2023, the council had established the task force, which to my knowledge had never met.
Never even created,
Yeah,
yeah,
to try to, you know, understand better the, I mean, it's quoted right there, examine historic current future situation of village of Northport regarding short-term rentals. And, as the manager has noted in a couple of his emails, that he and the staff are working on identifying short-term rentals, through our permitting process and, trying to line those up with what's available on Airbnb and VRBO and such. And I think the real question is, do we have a short-term rental issue? And in terms of not just do we have short-term rentals and do we have too many, but are they creating a real issue in terms of noise, parking situations and stuff like that, and how we would address that. And I just, in my opinion, I don't know that we need a task force if the manager is willing to take on those duties and report back to this, in terms of, having the manager do one thing, the task force doing another thing, and, what would be the best steps? And since Will's spoke, I'm gonna let him go first.
I don't think we do have a short-term rental problem in Northport, and the people that. And the people that think this is gonna somehow affect the affordable housing inventory are just wrong. I've watched the STR numbers go down over the last 10 years because I deliver to people that stay at STRs. Once that STR is taken out of that inventory and people stop renting it out and they just start living there, or they don't want to deal with the hassle of renting, or they spend 2 months of the summer, there, then it doesn't really change anything, but it definitely does. We know when they get taken out of the rotation, because there's houses we deliver to every week, and all of a sudden that house is no longer taking renters, and they already have bikes and kayaks. So I know very upfront, clearly, that the short-term rentals, the number of short-term rentals is going down, and even so, it's not affecting the affordable housing market at all either. So limiting or getting rid of short-term rentals, it will do one thing. It will really cripple the downtown tourism economy, and it isn't gonna help anybody get an affordable house. It's a total red herring. And that said, the only thing that's been proven to work, and there's a perfect ordinance example, is overlay zoning, which I was saying, like broken record for 5 years. We don't need a committee, we just need somebody to write an ordinance, and you can take the one from South Haven, Michigan. Or Grand Haven, South Haven, one of those havens. I'm really tired. And copy it, change the word into that Northport, and then come up, have a committee, not a committee, but have the council come up with a map. Where you want to allow, and I would say you're not gonna take a house down on the waterfront, at the end of Fifth Street or something, and that's suddenly you say they can't be short-term rentals anymore. That's not gonna turn into a house for a starter family. It's still gonna be a McMansion or whatever. It's still gonna be out of anybody's affordability range. It's just gonna bring a lot less tourists with money to the town. And so anything within two blocks of the water should not be limited in any way, because there's no benefit to anyone by limiting the STRs in those neighborhoods. This is dumb. Do it neighborhood by neighborhood, and then there are some people that have places, maybe on Ransom, I don't think there are anymore. There's a couple on a few blocks up from the water on Fourth and maybe Third. And so you gotta lay that map on there and over time, you know, the current owners that are doing it, that are registered, they're grandfathered in, you can't have any new STRs in that zone. This is a zoning overlay zone. It's not, this is how it works. And so you don't get any new ones up there, in places that could be neighborhoods for starter families and things like that. That should be done. That should have been done 5 years ago. Jim Dyer and I were this close to actually setting down and doing it because it would have taken us like 2 hours because he knows how to do it. I can't do it on my own. It's not in my wheelhouse. I can't do it this summer. But it's a really easy solution and it's all we need to do. And all this committees, ad hoc committees and hand wringing and people saying, oh my gosh, it's such a problem. And if we could just get rid of the STRs, then people could afford to live here. That's just wrong. And it's a total waste of time. It's a waste of everyone's time. I mean, there's one solution, there's one thing to be done. It's very simple and it won't have an immediate effect at all, but it will keep things from getting out of control in the future. And so that's how I feel about it. And that's all I think we need to do. I don't think this board needs to waste a lot of time on it until we're ready to vote on an ordinance. So either Jared can work with Ross or, I mean, I'm willing to roll up my sleeves in September, but their legal writing is 100% plagiarism. You just take the ordinance from the other town and copy it and change a few words so it fits here. And they are out there and it's working in those communities. The South Haven ordinance I've heard is doing good things. So that's something we can do and that's all we should do. That's my opinion.
Laura,
Go on, Lauren.
we'll just work on it.
So I agree that the first thing we need to know is if there's a problem or not, and I also agree that there may not be a problem. And
There could be in the future though, the overlay zoning would prevent it from becoming a
so
problem.
right now though, with what there is, I mean, people do have to, on a case-by-case basis, bring their short-term rental. So it's, if they're wanting to do it new and an overlay just tells people that they can't. To me, the main thing, I would like to see Jared work on pulling together what STRs there are, that we're aware of, that he can find, getting that together so that then can be a discussion as, is there a problem and is there something that needs to change, or is what's working, or you're too worried about the future or whatever. But I think him working on the list is what the committee would be working on anyway, and so it doesn't make sense to me at all to have a committee for it. I also think if we're talking about solutions, I'm not sure that a solution needs to be about STRs at all, especially because there's many communities who were seemingly doing the exact right thing. And then now that years have passed, it is very much turned out to not be the right thing and lots of lawsuits and everything else. But I have wondered for a long time if there's a way to, or look into incentivizing long-term rentals versus trying to penalize short-term rentals. I know Wyoming, Michigan is doing that, where if you do rent long-term, there are tax incentives and different things that you can do. Obviously, you'd have to fund that with some sort of revenue, which then would be a whole other discussion. But to me, like maybe if the real issue is trying to solve the housing crisis and long-term housing and rentals, like, is there a way to just look at long-term rentals then? And if there's a way beyond what we've already done, changing the zoning to allow ADUs and eliminating the square footage so that you can do small houses and all these different things. But just seeing what other paths to promote long-term rentals so that they could be in some way more financially viable than in comparison to the STRs, which obviously you can't compete with because that's so much money coming in comparison. It's also a lot of work though. I mean, that's why people, I think, are also stopping, because it's actually exhausting.
I mean, if you want the history of it, the STR boom came in 2008, 2009, when two things happened. The economy crashed, the real estate market crashed. All these people had invested in these medium-sized, future retirement homes, and they realized with the market crash, they couldn't afford them. And at the exact same time, out of nowhere, VRBO just popped up on the internet, where you didn't have to pay a leasing company in Traverse City 30% of your gross to take care of renting your property. You could do it yourself for free. And everybody's like, well, why wouldn't I? And so they just exploded until people got it gentrified out. Those people were in their 40s. Now they're in their 60s. They're like, I don't want this. I don't want weird people sleeping in my bed anymore. I'm one of them. I did STR for a long time. And then I thought about how many people have slept in my bed, and I went out and got a new mattress. But, but anyway, that is what's happening. It's just not any fun. And it's going away, but it is not making the houses more affordable. It's not affecting the housing pricing or long-term rental inventory. It just isn't. I mean, they're going away on their own. It's having no effect. I do think that could change in the future, though. I still want to do the overlay thing. Just so it doesn't pop out of control if the economy does something weird in the future. Also, anybody that wants to get grandfathered in should have already registered their STR, and it's a backdated 2 years. To make sure they were already in compliance, so that everybody doesn't run out tomorrow and register their house as an STR. So that they get their, even if they've never used it as an STR, they can fill out the paperwork, say, oh, I'm an STR, just so that they're grandfathered in. You use a date from before we had this conversation.
Okay,
So, I thought about this a lot. I mean, I was this close.
it sounds like.
And then Jim left. And he got, he was always busy, so, and, we got this, and there's only so much. You don't expect it to be a silver bullet.
No, Susan?
Will, I trust your personal judgment, but I think it's just personal judgment, personal opinion. And I'd like to see numbers.
I have data.
What, do you have data? Do you have the number? Can you tell us the number of STR in Northport?
Comprehensive study from 2017,
That's-
and I can pull that up and show you how many are no longer STRs. This is not.
But what about,
dance.
but what about the new ones?
There aren't any.
Well, I'd like,
There are very few.
Let's
Let
have
me
manager.
shed a little light on
Okay.
this as much as I can without having the exact figures.
okay,
In fact, I can pull them up, but just some rough figures.
okay,
And we're still finalizing what we're finding right now.
okay,
The township has been working on this. They've gone deeper than we have, and we're sharing notes. And what we've seen is roughly 45 listings online for short-term rentals in the village. Our registration has about just under 30. I believe it's 28.
okay.
Okay, so that's a gap of 15
They're not compliant.
that are not compliant.
Right.
Most likely, right? And so my next step is to notify them.
Mhm.
You're not registering. You could be violating the ordinance and subject to enforcement fines. So that's the next step that I'm working on, but in terms of numbers, those are some figures that we have right now that I'm finalizing.
Okay,
In terms of total residential units in the village, we just talked about this the other day, we're looking at water sewer bills. 540 is the number that we landed on. Bills, so,
That's about the same as the number of voters. That's kind of interesting.
well, remember they're seasonal in there.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
We were
It's just
looking
kind of
at,
interesting
okay,
they come
how
out
do
the
we,
same.
how do we kind of narrow that down?
Right.
Let's think of that 540, how many are seasonal?
Right.
Half, let's say.
Yeah,
maybe
you're
roughly
allocating
270 housing units. 45 seem to be
So that's
listing
less-
online.
yeah, so that's
20%.
20%,
Less than 10%.
Okay,
yeah,
so
that's pretty small.
those aren't final numbers, but
Yeah,
at least it
right.
gives you an idea.
And again, a high percentage of those are on the water. So there's no net gain in outlawing them, that you're not gonna get anything by doing it.
Some people, I don't think Mimi would mind that I mentioned her name because she's pretty vocal about this. Mimi Haverline owns Willowbrook and is a village resident, has long argued that that STRs should be treated as businesses so that that they pay more than, that they pay more for their sewer, et cetera, that they pay registration fees. She thinks that there should be a lottery every 3 years where, the same people can't run an STR indefinitely. I'm probably getting some of this wrong. But Mimi, if you're out there, maybe she should, speak at one of our meetings on this. She has some really good ideas, I think. And it seems wrong that the STR owners don't pay any kind of fee to the village.
There's just a registration fee, which is nominal. What's the registration fee then?
I think it's-
There was no business fee either.
So
Right.
Michigan State law, the Michigan State Supreme Court has ruled that a municipality cannot charge an unreasonable fee for an STR. It has to be relative and reasonable within the actual cost of the municipality. So if you start charging people, this is what City of Acme tried to do. They tried to charge $1,000 per STR, they lost. It was considered violated the Michigan State Constitution. So you start charging $1,000 for it. This is the thing about Mimi, she doesn't understand anything about the law. You can't do that. It's illegal. Secondly, doing a lottery, all you're gonna do is take a beautiful house on the water and they will lose the lottery that year. And that family that's been coming, like Joni's, that's been coming the same family every year for 15 years, all of a sudden can't rent because they took that. How does that benefit anyone?
Well, there.
I mean, it's
there are
just dumb.
arguments-
I'm
There's.
sorry, it doesn't
Oh,
make sense. It
Mimi,
has
forgive
not been
me.
thought through.
Forgive me, Mimi.
Well, I mean,
I read her whole thing. None of it makes sense legally or practically.
I would like to just add though, I think there is a way for municipalities to charge a fee.
Can't be much.
And I think the way that the case law refers to it has to be like a rational nexus
Yeah.
between the fee that's charged
And-
and the cost
To
of
administer it.
administering the program.
Right.
So if there's a way that we can show the village is incurring this cost in administering the program, and we can collect that cost from the 45 or whatever number of
I think,
units that are
yeah,
out there. I'm not saying it would
if you
necessarily.
get up over
be
$100,
$1,000.
you know, you could get a class.
Yeah, I don't think that you'd be raising enough money that necessarily, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be, like, maybe there is a small fee, but.
I think, yeah,
But again, I don't think that's gonna be revenue that helps all that much with anything, especially if there's 45 total.
well, and
Even
somebody's
if it's
got,
$100 for the registration.
there's the cost of
that's-
policing it online. One of you guys, a staff member, has to sit there on VRBO on the Airbnb all day and make sure that somebody's not squeaking under the radar, which they actually do in Grand Traverse County. They have full-time employees to monitor these short-term rental sites to see who is outside their zoning where you cannot have an STR.
Well, another thing I would find interesting to know, and one thing about this task force, if you all recall, this task force was sort of kicked around and created as an idea before we had an active manager. And so we were doing everything. We were doing research on everything we voted on. And this was a way to spread the burden around to a group of people who could research this idea. Now we pay somebody to do that sort of thing. What was I gonna say next? I can't remember. Oh, the thing that I would like to see is, I'd like to look at the last 20 home sales in the village of Northport and see what happened to them. Who bought those houses? Do they short-term rent them? Because I have the sense now, and maybe Anne Marie or some other realtors would be good at answering this, is that houses go up for sale and they are purchased right away by somebody.
It's changing right now. The market has shifted a lot.
Well, look at.
I'd like to know that. I'd like to know.
Yeah, but look at the purchase price and see if it would have ever been an affordable house for a starter home for a family anyway. And the ones I'm thinking of down like on Fifth, the greenhouse on the dark that your husband building. That's gonna be a VRBO, but there was no way that was ever gonna be a starter home lot. I mean, the lot by itself was over $1 million. I mean, it's like,
If there were some, some constraints on starting yet more STRs, people wouldn't.
well, that's what I'm saying. That's
Well,
why
like
we,
I
that's
said, Saul,
why we do the overlay zone.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. People going forward and they're not gonna buy a house on ransom with the idea that they're gonna, or they won't be able to. We need to get this thing in place. It should have, 5 years I've been saying this.
They still, right now, do have to bring it case by case to the planning commission though. Like you can't.
Yeah,
do it.
with our new zoning ordinance, I suppose they do.
They do, and then
that's
it's
good.
case
That's
by case, and you
protected.
get to see what
Right.
what is that neighborhood, what
Right.
are the circumstances, you get to talk to the people, hear what their story is it something
And-
they inherited from their family, and they're trying to keep the family home, or is it somebody who bought it
Right.
and they own 30 other properties and they just
I-
make more money off?
I kind of forgot that you guys put that in.
So, I mean, to me, this is
that is
already
good
happening,
protection.
but it's case by case,
Yeah.
so you get to hear and see, and it's not just this like rubber stamp, either you get the stamp or you don't. So to me, I mean, we already solved it, like,
Well,
and
yeah,
I also don't know what is wrong, like, I don't see, I understand what you're saying, I just don't see how that fixes what the problem I see as, which is a housing crisis.
right.
It's not an STR crisis, it's a housing crisis, and an STR and the housing aren't equal, like those don't equal each other, they just don't. And that's why,
Well,
to me, if we want to do something to
I
try and fix
agree
it
with
or
that.
get more long-term rentals,
We have
we need to
built
look
it.
at how we do the long-term
Yeah,
rentals or how we
agree.
get
I
that,
want-
not,
I want,
yes,
I
we
want
have
the
to
Yeah,
go
families-
ahead.
Let's bring the conversation down to,
Okay.
we're all getting excited, I like it.
I want the families in the heart of our village, not,
I would love that too.
transients.
I don't think that regulating STRs is gonna do that at all.
And what I'll say is that Kathy Russell, who has done a lot of work on
Oh,
STRs,
Yeah.
shared an article with me based on New York City. Which, you know.
There were other things.
Yeah, yeah, other, but it shows that, the STR and the affordable housing, they are not correlated. And so by restricting short-term rentals, you don't get more long-term rentals. And as Will pointed out, a lot of these short-term rentals are people that are buying homes, want to spend part of the year in them, and are renting them out, for a portion of the year. I think the idea that homes were being bought up by a conglomerate group of hedge funders and using them, has sort of, the proof hasn't been in the pudding. It's that
Exactly.
it's
And
being
you have
purchased
to-
by.
People
Individuals.
never, and when they have these conversations, they completely ignore the economic boost to the village, to the bars, the restaurants, the shops like mine, admittedly, and, you, by eliminating that, you're killing the town. You
Yeah,
know,
Absolutely.
it's not a win. Getting rid of the STRs isn't gonna help Northport. I mean, Laura's right, I kind of forgot that we changed the ordinance, it was just last year, the whole zoning ordinance, that there is protection in there.
Our
I
first
still
one is
think the
equity.
overlay needs to be in there, so it's very clear when new buyers come in, that there is a colored zone. And your house is in it, you're not gonna get a variance to make it into an STR.
Well, we could
So-
have the manager, if I know, we don't wanna wait until September, but if the manager could look at overlay zone and.
I'm sure you're familiar with the term, you got a planning degree.
Yeah.
Well,
You know
yeah,
more
yeah.
about it than I do.
But I mean, in terms of, others that have, in other communities, we can further discussion, he can look at the town, the different zones. See what we think would work or not work, I mean,
Yeah.
the discussion can continue.
I'll bring back an example of how an overlay would work. One thing I'd like to point out about the special use aspect of short-term rentals. So there's amendments to the zoning ordinance now required, it's transient lodging is the term that's used, and there, you'll find this term used interchangeably in the zoning ordinance with short-term rental. Because there are different sections that refer to short-term rental. But in the use section, transient lodging is allowed as a special use in all districts. If a proposed special use comes in for transient lodging and it complies with the relevant sections of the zoning ordinance, it's difficult to not approve that. So as long as it complies. So it's not necessarily something that's going to allow you to weed out short-term rentals that you look at and you say, yeah, I don't like it there. Because it's allowed in all districts.
Yeah, and
Okay,
you're right.
so
That's true.
Again, that's why we need both.
If it was challenged, I think the village would have a very difficult time saying why one was denied here and it was allowed there.
Very good point.
I think it is a barrier though, just the same. And I think just by having the requirement of a special use permit, you're gonna limit the number of potential applicants. In fact, I had a gentleman here the other day. I think it's a perfect example, and I think he was maybe just kind of testing the water. But he wanted to know, oh, hey, if I just do this kind of casually with friends and family, and like, do I need a special use permit? And I went through the regulations and said, you would. And so someone like that, potentially that's more casual about their short-term rental use, I think it would dissuade them from wanting to go through a formal process to get a special use for that particular property that was in question. So I think there will be a little bit of an effect of limiting the number of casual short-term rentals that are out there, but it's not a way to completely arbitrarily limit where they go. I don't think that's gonna be possible under the current amendments to the zoning ordinance. So perhaps.
And I
it is worth
do,
looking
and I
at.
fully understand your overlay district argument and have understood it the entire time. I just really do have a problem with saying that the homes that are on the water that are worth more and aren't gonna be aren't gonna be long-term rentals or owned by a family, a starter family, can make more money on their property, but someone on Ransom Street can't. Like,
It's
I
neighborhood
just,
character. I mean, that's how that's how you can justify it legally.
that's fine. I don't agree with
And
it.
those are practically
So-
poor neighborhoods.
Yeah, I just don't agree with it.
No, that's fine.
Right, it is, like, that's
Yeah.
what we're here for.
Exactly. So overlay district, my other question would be, do we have any, is there any fine for a STR that is non-compliant with our zoning?
There is, yes. I don't have the ordinance in front of me. I can pull it up though.
But you got your book.
But, oh, I do. I have a ticket book. I do.
Oh, you
I'm
do?
not kidding.
Oh, yeah, he shipped it to me. He's got power now.
I've got one too,
Oh, look out, street administrator.
you know.
So,
Ordinance 111 for short-term rentals. And let's see here, it's quite a short ordinance, it's only a few pages, but violations, any owner who fails to register is in violation of this ordinance and shall be subject to a fine of $200.
okay,
After notification, the owner has 7 days in which to comply. Failure to comply within that period will result in an additional fine of $200 per day.
okay, so there is some,
That's really where you start getting into heavy fines. if
Sure.
There's a failure to comply.
okay,
$200 a day would be a lot more than, that'd take a sizable chunk out of whatever you're
Sure.
collecting.
Well, I wish Hugh was here because I don't have a sense that we've had any issues recently in recent seasons with loud noise or parking.
Can I address that?
Oh,
Not in
yes,
the village.
Chris.
Oh, maybe Chris does.
Yeah, yesterday I was called on a parking issue in South Shore. Recent, potential short-term rental. And South Shore is, a lot of you know, there's no shoulder really to park on that first portion. Got very little off the pavement. So that's one thing it's come to light. For instance, also at our shop over here. Today we've seen 7 cars over here. They don't have the, capacity for that. And it's all temporary. You can use that term. But it's coming to light more and more in the last few years.
Mm.
I kind of see it a little more. See it day to day,
Yeah,
season to season, so.
Well, when we did have a much more stringent STR process in this village, you had to provide, each STR owner had to provide off-street parking for all the cars, for all of your guests. So even if they had to park on your lawn, they could not, you had to have off-street parking for everyone in the house. We've gotten really lax on that. But that is something, especially in South Shore, that I wouldn't mind seeing enforced a little bit, or some way with through the registration process, that they're aware that this has to happen, because that's a safety hazard.
Yeah, and I don't, back to, I was.
you're good.
Joking, I was issued as a street administrator. You know. They hand out a ticket or citation, but I don't think it should really go to that level. If you get to that level, I'm gonna come with sheriff's department. And that plastic badge or a rubber bullet, so. But I talk to people to say, you can find, what can we do? To eliminate any problems in the future, and that's really all I can do is suggest that
Well, that's great.
and advise them. And after that,
We have a ticket book.
True.
Jared has a ticket book.
I do too,
Oh, good.
for real,
Well,
they're ready. Hold up.
so Will, are you saying that we used to have an ordinance about short-term rentals that had all kinds of details in it, and then what happened to it?
yeah,
What
it
happened?
it was all, and she just clocked in, it was just, it was because of a big dispute down on Fourth Street, about parking between 2 neighbors that were very upset about the cars couldn't be parked in the road. And they changed their parking arrangements, and then, I don't know, it just sort of faded away, Joni, and I don't know what happened.
There are requirements on the application.
Yeah.
The ordinance refers to the application. So,
Okay.
so it could be
It-
added.
Yeah, and it'll say that all parking has to be accommodated on site. It's on the
Good.
registration form,
Okay,
No.
I got it.
it's not part of the short-term rental ordinance. And then,
I got it.
and there's not a, it can be difficult to apply the standards from the zoning ordinance for parking problems that are happening yesterday morning. You know?
Right.
And this would also be part of a special use permit approval process. So this one that's gonna be at the planning commission next week. On their site plan, they have to show that they have parking that's adequate to accommodate the use.
Uh-huh.
The number
And so
of
that's
people per
enforceable.
house.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
enforceable. You could put conditions on a zone to say,
Okay.
you have this number of guests, maximum, for a special use.
Mhm.
And you could limit parking that way as well. But I think that's probably what happened with this 4th Street issue. Is that there might not have been a mechanism in place to say, you short-term rental have to accommodate all of your parking on site. There might not have been a mechanism to actually follow through and enforce that. So it says, this is in the zoning ordinance, sufficient parking for the rental use shall be provided on the property. But does that mean you can issue a notice of violation to someone that's parked on the side of the road? You see where I'm going with that? Like,
Okay.
that's that might not be enforceable.
So you'd need more specific language to address that situation.
Well, does the village ordinance though
If we
now
wanna
say all of the stuff on the form is something you have to comply with? If it says that already, then anything that's on the registration form is,
The registration form doesn't have the power of law like an ordinance does. So that.
so we need to revise the village ordinance if that's what, to
Yeah,
include it.
yes, you would need to be more specific with the village ordinances. Yes, because. The zoning ordinance says, and this is what's on the registration form, the registration form is taking something from the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance says sufficient parking for the rental use shall be provided on the property. So if there's someone parked, that there's a parking issue that arises because of the short-term rental use. Can I then use that sentence to go issue a notice of violation to whoever owns that short-term rental?
Yeah, no, I get that the zoning's not,
That's
no, I get that,
that's where the enforcement becomes an issue.
right, no, I understand that.
And we allow parking on our streets.
Right. So,
Well, and I definitely think this is why if you work on pulling together the registry of what we have and then bring it back, then that can be further discussion from there. And if everybody else wants to see an overlay example, then we do that, you know,
I'm
you
not
bring
sure.
that back. But
I would not give Jared instructions to pursue an overlay when there's only 4 of us here and 2 of us at least have reservations.
I think that if you do the registry and bring that information back so we can have more discussion, we'll have more of our
I
members
agree on
here.
that.
And then,
I agree on
because I
that.
mean, obviously it needs further discussion, but I think the bottom line is we don't need the task force. Right, that's the main thing, right?
that's
Like-
clear coming out of this.
Yeah.
Just for the record, I'm gonna work on sending a letter to the short-term rentals that are being advertised but aren't registering. I think we're obligated.
And I think,
to that.
again, if they get that letter and then they don't immediately go, oh my gosh, I just didn't know, and then register. Then that's, you know, bad on them, because to me, if there's no fee and they've now been notified, there's no excuse to say why you didn't know.
Except for when the change happened, nobody was notified.
Right, I mean, I think there is a somewhat valid excuse, like if you're just unaware, you're unaware. But if you're able to notify them and say, please register, there isn't even a fee. I would hope that those people are going to, and if they don't, then that again shows us if there's an issue or not.
All right. Yeah. Any other discussion, or it sounds like Jared's got his orders? All right, thanks for the very deliberate discussion on that situation. That moves us to our sanitary sewer rates and the debt collection. And there was a spreadsheet in there that shows, and you can take it over whenever you want, but that right now we are anticipating a shortfall in paying off the debt service, the bonds. And that the shortfall per RE would be about $225 total. And so what we're looking at is a potential increase to the debt service that we're currently billing out is $87 per quarter. and bumping that up by $20.48 for the remaining 11 billing cycles, which would bring us up to even par for when it's time to pay it off. And anything from the staff regarding that? or-
That's a solid explanation. I wanted to bring it for discussion. I don't want there to be any surprise about it. I think this is something that generally you've known about, that this is sort of been, gone back a few years, where you could look ahead and anticipate there could be a shortfall in collecting sufficient revenue to retire the debt just from the debt collection portion of the sewer bill. So if we're going to schedule action, I'd like to know if there's support, if there's other questions, things that might become an issue before we bring it to the next regular meeting.
Some people are gonna have raised eyebrows because we just did the biggest rate increase ever, about a year and a half ago, and Dawn Lund's study on this was pretty comprehensive. It looks like she missed, but she didn't miss by a lot. I don't, and it's $200 per RU for over 3 or 4 more years. I think we have to do it. Let's vote on it next meeting. We don't need to vote today.
I agree.
I just wanted to point out, Dawn's study was on the operations and maintenance.
Yeah, I thought she looked at debt service too, though.
She, we never, her report did not cover that in the end when we looked at
Oh,
that, so
okay.
unfortunately. But, this is pretty clear. We know how many
Yeah.
quarters we're gonna be billing. May change a little bit. We have a couple new connections coming on.
That's seen that all the time.
But just because a house pays for a connection fee, Jared and I had that conversation, it could be 3 years before they're actually connected. 2, 3, I see it all the time. So people always think, we've had all these connections. Where's the revenues? And it takes time, that's true.
One question I have is that I know when Jim first started, he looked into and applied to that distressed village grant so that we could potentially get those funds, and we didn't get that grant. But my understanding from his review of it after we found out we didn't get it was that there were a number of things that potentially we could work on that we could then apply again in the future. I just didn't know if that's something, I agree that we have to do something. It's not like we can wait. I think that it makes sense, but I just wonder if that's something that can be looked into too, so that there's potential for additional revenue or a way to do it without it just being increase in the future.
I pulled up the grant application for that, and in order to qualify as a distressed municipality, you have to meet certain conditions that grant programs through the Office of Treasury. And those conditions include not filing an audit in a timely way pursuant to the statute, and having a fund balance deficit. The village doesn't meet those.
Yeah,
So I suspect that's probably why it was not. There were some other issues.
There were
with the
other
grant
stuff, yeah,
application.
yeah.
Some things that weren't consistent, I think, with between the project and the application documents, but I don't think.
I just wanted to find out, cause
Yeah.
like, if that is something we can pursue, I would definitely love if there was another avenue to pursue, obviously, cause who wants it to go up? Nobody. So, okay.
So sounds like we'll bring it to the next council meeting for action
Yep.
in July. Okay. Thank you. Water filling station at the marina. As Laura noted, there was some correspondence regarding that. I guess I didn't get a chance to read that. I don't know if it was in the packet earlier this morning, but,
It was enthusiastically in support.
yeah. And, when, Jared and I met last week to go over the agenda, I mean, one of the things I brought up was that the funding for this could come out of the marina fund, since it's in the marina, versus the, village's, general fund. And what was the cost of it was about,
Estimated 4,000, 4 to 5,000.
okay,
And describe what it'll look, is it a water fountain? It's basically-
No, a filling station.
So you can
So
fill
for
water
instance-
bottles,
Okay,
You know how you put
Oh,
the water bottle?
right, right,
in the-
right.
Yeah.
okay,
cause right now, the only one that is near the market where that pavilion is the one over at the bathrooms, which does work. But that one's just a drinking fountain, so if you're filling water bottles,
okay,
it's more inconvenient. And then there are people at the farmer's market that can benefit. I think music in the park. I mean, just to me, any
So
bike
where would it
riders, I
be?
mean, because we don't have one that does, unless you go into the bathrooms and use the sink.
So where will this be?
Well, like. Chime in.
Sure.
With Jared and I, we talked about it. One would be, I guess the ideal location would be the center parking lot, farmers market parking lot, by the bike rack, the northern end, with crosswalk with bank is.
Mhm.
Right in there, we have a water main nearby.
Perfect.
So back what you said, Laura, with the drinking fountain at the South Beach Bath. That'd be a way to potentially cut costs, so you remove that, utilize that. Not that be too far out of the, flow. You know, so there's a couple options you guys could decide, but, it's not just an afternoon project.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
There are a couple of components to this, buying the piece of equipment, doing some of the actual work. Paying with DPW staff and then also having a contractor help. None of those would necessarily exceed the village manager's spending authority. So we could do the project and not bring it back to council. That's one of the reasons I wanted to schedule it. If you're okay with it, we can just start moving it along. I'd like to do it as early as late July, early August with what I indicated in the memo. So if you're okay with it, we'll just start moving ahead.
I'm really in support of it a lot. Like, I just think that it would be really beneficial and helpful, and obviously I had public come to me and ask if we could assist, if the village could help out in this issue. I think that if it saves a substantial amount of money to leave it in the same, to do it where there already is one, then that would be of interest, but if it's only a bit, to me, having two locations is beneficial, because then there's some over closer to the marina or the launch and different, and the, you know, and the market and everything else, and there's still the one over by the bathrooms. I don't think there would be harm in having two of them if it's
I agree.
somewhat close to the same cost. I mean, I agree, it's probably cheaper though to replace the one that's there, so,
Yeah, to utilize the existing water. line.
yeah, because it's right
And
there.
I know that water fountains are kind of falling out of style. You know,
Mhm.
yeah, so, so we do have two drinking, again, South Beach and then it has,
Yep.
and we can see how that goes. And if it's like it's a fairly. We've been, we eliminated one, eventually it has run too. For the drinking problem. Big good filling station, that would actually be somewhat easier because you have a building there to mount on that could have be lit. There's several options.
I definitely think the one at Hazarat, though, if we change that one out, that doesn't necessarily help the farmer's market all that much, just because that one's so far, I don't think people are gonna walk over there. I know right now, part of the issue is people aren't even willing to walk to the drinking fountain. But, and part of it too is just that, I think also though, the fact that you like, it is a weird angle because of the molded metal and everything, depending on your water bottle to fit it in so that it, I mean, for like 3 minutes, you're holding the button there, so, yeah, so. But to me, I don't think it is that far to walk. I mean, like, really. So again, if it saves enough, but if not, I would love to see too.
You're talking about the center park by the pavilion where the bike
There's
rack
a
is?
photo in the,
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
so that's
a photo.
So,
That's what I thought. I just confirm.
yeah, we were thinking right there because by that bike rack, you'd have a nice pad that we could, you gotta make somewhat of a stand support.
Mhm.
The track. And our water main going to the boar's bath is in that location.
Okay.
But we're gonna, you're gonna be disrupting a bit, you gotta make a pipe tap and a water main.
So will we? I lost track at some point. Will we still have an old fashioned water fountain somewhere that people without valves can drink from?
At Hazra.
Okay.
yes.
well, I do know you can get units that
And
have
then
both, like the
marina.
school has the
Yeah.
both units and Traverse, like at the open space and all those, they have both, like the water fountain and the drinking fountain.
Actually, I stand corrected, so we have two, there's one at Hazard Bath, there's one at the front of the boaters bath.
Okay,
There's one currently.
okay, that's right. I forgot that one. Okay, okay, good, because yeah, I don't carry a water bottle.
So-
I would-
Sounds like we're in support of the water filling station at the
Mhm.
marina, allowing the manager to move forward with that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we're cruising. Item F, public participation plan. This is something that Jared said has come from the planning commission, asking the council to review or possibly adopt, but in our conversation, it sounds like they're also just, it's gonna go back.
They want to do further revisions.
Yeah.
So I guess after they took that action, I thought maybe just wait until they do the further revision. And then the council isn't acting on it twice, but then I think the counter argument is, at least there's something in the meantime. If you approve it now, at least you have something that's been formally adopted, because this was recommended by the planning commission in 2023, but then was never formally adopted. So if you see the need to have the adopted plan in place now, while the planning commission works on revisions, then I'll bring it back for action at the regular meeting.
Yeah, what the planning commission had asked was for the council to consider adopting it now, because we honestly, like myself and Jane, both thought that we had adopted that. Since 2023, Jim had brought it to us originally, so that it would be on the books. And then we could work on the revisions when we get to it, which isn't going to be immediately, because we're working on the other things. And while there are things we would like to update, it's not like it's a bad plan. It's just there's some stuff that we would change now that we've had more time to review it and everything else.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's my perspective and what came from the planning commission, but it's essentially a guideline that walks
Okay.
people through what happens and what the steps are
I-
for a variety of different,
Think we should
Permits
adopt
and
it and
things
let
and-
you guys work on it.
when we get to it. Yeah,
All right, yeah, I
we
read
could
through
bring
it,
that for
looks
next
good.
time.
Kind of outlines when participation is required, recommended, optional.
And
all
so that
stuff.
anyone applying for those permits or any of the public who is aware of those things then has somewhere to look at what those steps would be,
Mm-hmm.
like what to expect.
Mm-hmm. All right, so it sounds like we'll have it on the agenda next meeting for some action. So that we have it in place and then allow the planning commission to work on it as they can with other more important tasks at their home. Okay. And, Second Street encroachment. Okay, so in the document, in the Dropbox, you had a picture of the property in question over here, just north of the Second Street right away. And there's an outlined area where the encroachment is occurring. Photos of the gate, looks like a little stone wall steps and a pump that is on village property and has been for some time. In my discussion with the manager, he spoke with an irrigation company that was working on the property and said they have data going back to 1996 with this pump. So we're talking about- And clearly, this is an encroachment in the village's road right of way. And in my discussion with the manager, I said that I don't believe that this is right. Will, you have expressed this opinion as well. And in the example I gave is that in front of my house, there's 3 parking spots in the road right away. And, you know, should I be able to say, well, because I snow blow those instead of the village plowing them for me, you know, all of a sudden I own those parking spops and I'm gonna tell people who can and can't park there, and I don't think
Put up a gate.
it's allowed, exactly. And there is no, the term is escaping my brain right now, but where,
Adverse possession.
yeah, adverse possession, where a public can take, private citizen can take public property. And so, I guess we're looking for some,
I have drafted a letter
okay,
and reviewed it with village council. And he's gotten back to me, gave me a thumbs up on the letter, and it does what I described in the memo, which is basically put the owner on notice, you have to remove the encroachment by a certain date, or else then you have to go start a legal action.
mm-hmm,
So if council's okay with sending the letter,
Oh, you haven't sent it yet, because
I have not sent the letter yet.
oh,
Yeah,
send it.
so that's why I wanted to, I know this can be a sensitive issue, and then also, it's, the village could start incurring legal fees as a result of this. Already, I'm communicating with legal counsel, and if the owner doesn't comply, then the next step is to start taking legal action. And obviously, there's some financial consequences with that, and I don't.
This letter is very specific about the gate, the stone wall, the pump, and then any rocks in the creek.
Yes. It refers to landscaping and, not necessarily, I haven't identified every rock down there. But perhaps that's something that you'd like to weigh in on, maybe, to what extent you've seen the pictures, you can take a look and tell me exactly how you might want to express that.
Are there pictures in the letter?
There will be, yeah. I have some attachments that'll go along with it.
Cause I think if you put attachments in, to me, that makes it crystal clear.
And it can also be a little difficult to tell exactly what.
What
I mean,
rocks
I
were
think-
natural and.
Yeah,
what was there,
exactly,
yeah.
right, like, you can pretty much tell what has been placed there, but. Maybe not for every stone.
Mhm.
Well, he, if I may,
You may.
he admitted to his neighbors, that they moved those rocks with the intention of redirecting the stream, which I think Eagle would have something to say about. But Robin has not wanted, this is not high on her radar. There's a couple more things that have been done over the years. There's a row of hedge trees. There's 4 of them that were planted there as a screen, and that's not something that I think the village really needs to have moved. But, and this is something I said to Jared, and when I thought about it, because I'm expecting legal retaliation. I think he's gonna lawyer up, and this is gonna end up possibly in court. But if our leverage is, if you will, as the council said, is that if we go to court and we win, the trees, everything you planted is gone. And I know he doesn't want to lose the trees. And that's kind of like offering him, life without parole instead of the possibility of death penalty. And so I think we can hold that in advance. But I think we may even, if this does go to court, we might be obligated. And we can certainly say it's a possibility that a judge would order that everything he planted, there's another tree that's falling over, that's propped up, that's leaning on the gate, which makes it almost impossible for the kids to get down there and fish. And we just saw kids down here during this
Absolutely.
meeting. And they've made it, their sole intention is to put that stone barricade, the gate that used to have a lock on it. That is to make it look like private property, to prohibit public use, and that's not legal, and it's not neighborly, and it's
Okay,
something that we should do something about.
that's what I was looking for. I was looking for, I was thinking, well, what harm does this done? But what harm does this do? Do we really have a problem with this? But you've identified that it's
Yeah.
an area where kids used
Well,
to
and
fish, or
they're also
they should
claiming
be able to fish the whole creek, right?
that they don't have riparian rights to that creek as they claim they do. They can't, you can't just pump
Well,
water.
I know legally, and I know about rights and all that, but what harm is
Well,
it causing?
at some point you have to, what harm is it if I go 75 miles an hour into 22?
Because
And if I don't hit anybody, it didn't hurt anybody.
But no, you're in.
There's laws for a reason, and that's public property, and we have an obligation to the village, and it's
And
really
the
been-
question is, why is it taking us so long to do anything
a
about it?
really good question, because I've been complaining about it for years and years, and one of the reasons is we haven't had a village manager that wanted to take it up. Jim was on it, but he didn't want to get the hackles up on those particular homeowners while they were in litigation with Yard and Lake.
Mhm.
They want to wait till that lawsuit was settled, which it has been. So there's nothing stopping us now from doing what we should have done years and years ago. And it will come back that, yeah, I have some wood stacked in the other side of that easement but that's not a permanent structure. And I'm happy to move the wood pile. If it comes down to that, I'm sure that's one thing he's going to immediately shoot back at. I may move the wood pile now just to avoid the appearance of, being a hypocrite, but there's a complete difference between a stone permanent pump housing and drawing water than stacking a pile of logs on the village property. That's what I have to say about it. So we're not gonna, until the letter goes out, we won't really know how this is
I'd
gonna
like to see
play.
the letter before it goes out.
Yeah, it's a public record now because we talked about it. So, it has, And unless it's attorney-client privileged, which I don't think it is at this point.
It may be, but
Well,
I'll make sure to.
I don't see why it would
I'll,
be.
I'll send it.
Actually, I'm 90% sure it's not. It's not, because you're sending it to him. So it's public document.
I haven't sent it yet, though.
Well, okay, we're telling you to now.
Regardless,
Yeah,
if you wanna see it, I'll send it.
But I think we would
And I'll
like
send
to,
it to you.
Yes.
I'll share it
Yeah.
with the council
Mhm.
prior to sending it.
and send it to
yeah,
the
even
property.
if it is privileged, the council, we get to see privileged materials. I mean, the Ross represents us,
Yes.
so we are clients, we get to see it,
Sure.
and
Of course.
so,
Yep.
yeah. If he doesn't want it to go to public, that's fine, I don't care. And obviously, once you send it to them, they can publish it,
Yes.
so it's no longer
Absolutely.
privileged.
Yes.
The seal has been broken, as they say.
Mhm. All right, so it sounds like we would like you to proceed with sending the letter. We've answered the question of, is there any feedback? All right, brings us to item H, the affinity invoice. It's exceeded the $3,000 village manager spending limit. It was for additional support here with our iPads recently and such, and so it looks like that'll be on our July 17th regular meeting for approval.
And I would like to just routinely do this with work sessions. If there's anything that's over the village manager spending limit, bring it here, discuss it. Transparent, and if you get feedback, but this actually is for services that have not yet been rendered. Because we preload support services, just to be clear, it's about $3,100. That we preload for support. We've used it quite a bit recently because when I was onboarding, had this issue with the iPad that's come up, things like that. I expect we probably won't use much of this until we start really transitioning to BSNA. But there's always something that comes up along the way too.
Good.
Yeah, I super appreciate you bringing it to us, but I support doing this for sure.
Okay, any other discussion? Pretty straightforward. Okay, so we'll see that next meeting. I was gonna say next month, but we meet in 2 weeks. All right, so that brings us to the additional item I, street banners. Laura, you wanted this?
So my
to go?
question just was, we have the street banners that go on the light posts. The last time I'm aware that some were printed was 2020 COVID, with the different phrases and stuff. One of the things that I just thought of that I wanted to put out there and see if it was possible or if other people thought it'd be cool, but I wondered if we could do, Citizen of the Year banners that go up at some point that have the ones that we have with the photo and just the year that they're Citizen of the Year. So like when people see Bob Noel, they're like, oh, it's Citizen, yeah, anyway.
Okay.
That was my question, and I didn't know how much they cost or if other people thought that was, but I just thought, and they wouldn't have to be up all the time, because I think we rotate them some anyway, depending on what time of year it is, yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to ask, because I know that we haven't gotten, I don't think we've had new ones printed in a while, and I just wondered.
What are the costs?
So I guess that's something for you to look into.
We have
Well-
some old information,
Written,
but
written banner.
a couple of years.
There's been several people that spoke up about having, many communities have graduates.
Right,
Yeah.
and we had looked at that, I think that you guys looked at that when COVID was happening, but there wasn't enough time or something, because by the time that people thought of it to when, but that also could be awesome, because we have always a small number of graduates, probably we have enough light posts, but I just think it would be fun, because I think a lot of, like, we do Citizen of the Year, but I think a lot of people, unless you see the article in the paper, or you're at the One Music in the Park, you don't, they're on the wall, but I just think it would be fun, because it's more recognition.
I like it. Okay, so we'll have the manager look into the cost of street banners with, so we have a number to, and then we can decide what we want to put on and such. But Citizen of the Year is, I think, a great idea, a great way to acknowledge those former winners. Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussion items. Second, public comment. Once again, if you'd like to make a public comment, either in person or in Zoom, unmute yourself or raise your hand and I can recognize you and you can address the council for 5 minutes. Any takers? I see a hand up. Anne,
Well, I didn't know you were gonna be discussing short-term rentals I'm happy, I don't understand what the parking issue is. You don't have to explain it to me. I'll find out or go back and listen to the tape. But for those of you who weren't around or don't remember, the village, I'm sorry, the village spent thousands of dollars in legal fees defending my right and my husband's right to rent our house. You guys, we spent thousands also, but the village also spent thousands defending our right to rent our house. And one of the sad things about it was that it could have been worked out in a neighborly fashion. It was really sad. And the only thing, so I'm happy to fill Jared in or anybody else in about what happened and what I currently think about parking on township property in front of homes, which is an issue where you don't have a sidewalk and a curb and all of that. So you get into a lot of complications about the grass and the pavement and how wide is the street and all that stuff. I'd just like to say, I think it kind of applies a little bit to the stream over there on Second Street. It would be nice if this could be worked out in a let's make a deal way and not go to litigation, which again costs all of us, them and us, a lot of money. And it just seems pretty obvious that if you present them with the legal evidence of what the property lines are and you say, hey, let's make a deal, you keep the trees, we take down the gate, or the rocks or whatever, that trying a reasonable solution rather than just you must immediately take down your gate without mentioning and we'll sort of overlook the trees because they're good for the environment and they're not really hampering other people's use of the stream might be something to think about with these people, because we know they've brought lawsuits before, and they just like my neighbors here who brought a lawsuit against me. You have a good friend who gives you cheap legal advice, and everybody ends up spending a lot of money. So just hope you can work things out, and happy to answer any questions if you have any later. Take care. Thank you for your service as always.
Thanks, Ann. Any other public comment? Okay, hearing, it's not on here, 5A, any council comment? Just say I thought we had some good discussion and wish everybody a happy 4th. Come to the fireworks Citizen of the Year award at 7:30.
And what time do the fireworks start?
Dusk,
10,
10.
dark.
Okay, and if there's no other council comment, make a motion to adjourn at 3:44.
Support.
Thank you, Will. Roger.
Just said, great Facebook page.
Oh,
I thought we were getting out of here in an hour, man.
yeah, that's the first couple things took a while. Bro, I mean, it's like,
Yeah, I know, you're busy.
Would you
This
please
is.
to borrow
like
my
getting up at 4 o'clock to be there.